So I can still remember it like it was yesterday. My cousin and I were with our family at Costco, and we split off from them to go check out the video game section like most kids did growing up in the 80s and 90s. If you go to a department store that has video games, you have to go check out the video game section. It's standard operating procedure. And so we go over to the video game section and we spotted the LucasArts archives for the computer. Now the archives included a handful of Star Wars games, but the game we really wanted to play above all else was Star Wars Dark Forces. Now at the time I was 11 years old and definitely didn't even own my own computer. Kids didn't own their own computers back then like they do now. However, my cousin Jim had a family computer. Pretty sure it was a Hewlett-Packard if I recall, and of course this was before they shortened their name to HP, and we didn't get to use the computer very often for various reasons I won't mention on YouTube, but when we did, we usually played the PGA golf game or Maniac Mansion Day of the Tentacle, which was also developed and published by LucasArts. Now, we had no idea if Star Wars Dark Forces would even run on the computer, but we really didn't care. We were just happy that my Uncle Jim had agreed to buy it for us. So of course we get home, we help him pack the groceries, and then immediately we want to start working on installing the game. And the closer we got to installing the game, unfortunately, the further away we got from playing the game, because it became quite evident that the computer was under-spec'd. So the game was shelved for eternity. Well, not quite eternity, but around 30 years. So of course, I had to pick up the remastered Star Wars Dark Forces to see if the Force is as strong with this game as I thought it was going to be back in 1995. So, without further ado, the story is set in the fictional Star Wars expanded universe and begins shortly before the original Star Wars film A New Hope. Now the game's protagonist and playable character is Kyle Katarn, and Kyle is a mercenary working on behalf of the Rebel Alliance who discovers the Galactic Empire's secret Dark Trooper project, which involves the development of a series of powerful new battle droids and power armored stormtroopers. So basically they're building a super soldier. The story is actually pretty cool, and they do a good job communicating that narrative with voice acted cutscenes after you complete each level. And that's something they really worked on from what I had read in the remaster. Now the game plays and does control just like your typical 90s first person shooters, but there is a little bit more to it. The game kind of has adventure and puzzle elements to it. I would say this is more like an adventure first-person shooter. There's actually platforming in the game as well, which is something that was very uncommon back in the 90s, to have a first-person shooter where there's adventure elements and platforming in it and puzzles. There are some games that were in first-person that were puzzle games, like for example Myst, right? However, this is totally different because this is a first-person shooter bringing all those elements in. So this was a pretty bold project back in the day. And outside of that, there's other elements that are really cool. Like you have a handful of accessories that you use throughout the game. Like one of them's your snow cleats. You have infrared goggles. You got a headlamp that you can use to light up the dark areas in the game. And I think they did a really nice job in the remaster making use of this and improving the overall lighting. And then on top of that, you also have a ton of different weapons, and I guess I wasn't expecting this many weapons. You know, I expected maybe a handful, like 4, 5, 6 different weapons, and it ended up being a lot more than that. I think it was more like 12 weapons. Plus you can do hand-to-hand combat, which is fun, and It actually works really well on some enemies. It works better to do hand-to-hand combat. And then one thing that was really cool, like just by playing this game on PlayStation 5, is I think they made really nice use of the PlayStation 5 DualSense controller. So usually I have the microphone on the PS5 controller turned off, but with this game I had it turned on because these sound effects that come through the controller are actually really cool. Like for example, when you're shooting your laser rifle, you can hear the laser sound effects coming through the controller. And then on top of that, I had it playing on my 7.1 surround sound, so it sounded really good. And that's another thing I'll talk about when I get to the sound department, is just how great these sound effects do sound. So outside of the microphone on the controller, I think the main thing that was really cool about playing this on a PS5 is the way they use the haptic feedback. It was really impressive. I feel like the developer Night Dive Studios took full advantage of bringing this game to modern day console like the PS5. Like for example, when you're firing the laser rifle, you can feel it when you're pressing the R2 button. All the weapons just felt different when you fired them, and I love that. And so that was one thing that I wasn't even thinking about, and when I started playing the game, I was like, wow, they did a really good job with this. They did a really good job utilizing the DualSense controller. So that was a nice surprise and really added to the overall immersion of the game. Now let's talk about the graphics. So they stayed true to the original game. This is not a remake, it's a remaster, but I have seen footage of the original game being played on PC, and comparing it to the PS5 game, it's a huge difference. To me, it's night and day. Like, this is a true remaster in the sense that they've added like all the bells and whistles you can without changing the original assets. So graphically, the game looks really good, but let's talk about a few other things that I really appreciate it. I have a TV that is suited for PlayStation 5, meaning it has 120 Hertz and it has the variable refresh rate. So I was able to take advantage and play the game in 4K at 120 Hertz, and the game ran beautifully. So I played the first half of the game on my Sony 85-inch TV, and then I played the second half of the game on my BenQ X3100i gaming projector, and that was an awesome experience too, playing it on a huge 150-inch screen. So overall, I would say that when it comes to the graphics, they definitely made a lot of really nice enhancements and took advantage of the modern day horsepower that the PlayStation 5 provides. Let's jump in now to the sound department, and I gotta say, the game sounds amazing from top to bottom. I almost feel like you could have taken some of the music from Star Wars Dark Forces and put that music into Star Wars A New Hope, and nobody would question it. Like, that's how seamless it was. It really sounded like it was a part of not only the Star Wars universe, but that specific time frame. On top of that, the sound effects are truly authentic, from firing weapons to that sound effect when you open a door in Star Wars, and it just sounds completely authentic to the Star Wars universe. And that music really does a great job of just bringing you back to a simpler time. So overall, I was very impressed with the soundtrack. So, who is this game for? Obviously, Star Wars fans. If you're a fan of 90s first-person shooters, this game is totally your jam. So if you played Doom, Wolfenstein, System Shock, Quake, and just if you're a fan of LucasArts, you're probably going to enjoy this game. Like, it definitely has the classic LucasArts feel and touch to it. Now, diving into the game's content, you can play the game on easy, medium, or hard mode. I just played it on medium. That's typically what I will do. I don't play games on easy. I also don't want to play them on hard to where it's crazy. I just like to have a good, balanced experience. But what I will say is that the game is a lot longer than I anticipated it to be. Like, I didn't think there was going to be as many missions in the game as there was, and some of these levels were pretty long because some of the puzzles were actually pretty challenging. I'm not gonna lie, like, there's definitely some challenging puzzles in the game. One level in particular that happened later in the game where you have to unlock a bunch of doors to get into a vault, and that was really confusing. But at the same time, I really appreciate it because I'm like, it's only confusing because I just had a hard time with it, right? It's actually a good puzzle. And after I had solved the puzzle, I was just shaking my head like, I'm impressed. That was good. That was good. You got me. So Plenty of content in the game. If you're wondering like how long it takes to beat, it ranged anywhere from 11 to 16 hours, depending on if you're just trying to rush through the game or find all the secrets. Discussing now the game's emotion and charm, and I got to go back to what I said earlier about how this just feels like a direct continuation of that original Star Wars universe. Returning to that nearly 30 years after the game's been released was really special. I really did feel like, hey, if this game would have came out today, who knows, maybe it would have been adapted into a TV series on Disney+. This had a really cool story and it had a really nice feel to it. So it's just classic 90s Star Wars through and through. And I'm just grateful that we got the opportunity to play this game in its remastered form today with all these modern day bells and whistles. This game is just classic LucasArts on display. If you're not totally familiar with LucasArts, you know, they were in charge of making all the games in the LucasArts universe. So they made the Star Wars games, Indiana Jones, Maniac Mansion, the Sam & Max series, Grim Fandango, The Secret of Monkey Island. Of course, they made the Super Star Wars, Super Empire Strikes Back, and Super Return of the Jedi on Super Nintendo, which I actually really enjoy all of those games. Another one that I love, Zombies Ate My Neighbors. So they made a lot of awesome games, and that's only just scraping the surface of some of the games off the top of my head that I really enjoyed from LucasArts. And LucasArts games just had a certain special feel to them. You will know what I'm talking about when you play the game. It just feels different, but in a good way. So obviously one of the most important questions is, was the game fun? And yes, the game was absolutely fun. I did not want it to end, and as we all know, that's always a really good sign, right? It doesn't overstay its welcome, but it's definitely long enough. Longer than I thought it was going to be for a 90s first-person shooter. I wasn't expecting the amount of puzzles in the game, and I wasn't expecting the puzzles to be as good as they were. I didn't expect there to be any platforming in the game, and I really had to make precise jumps in order to hit certain platforms. On top of that, there's a lot of platforming that revolves around finding secret areas as well. So it's like you don't have to do some of these platforming areas, but if you want to find certain items, you're going to need to do it. I was definitely impressed with the level design and the variety. There's a lot of environmental variety throughout this game. And so when I started this game up, I just figured it was going to be a fun look at this game that I really wanted to play 30 years ago. And, you know, we'll see how it is. I don't know how good it's going to hold up. By the time I got to the end of the game, I'm like, man, this game was badass. So if you're wondering how much this game cost, it was $29.99 on the PlayStation Store. I feel like the $30 I spent was well worth it. Alright guys, now to give you my final thoughts. So nearly 30 years later, I finally get to play Star Wars Dark Forces, and as much as I wanted to play it back in '95, I think it's really cool that I got to play it today in 2024 with all the modern day bells and whistles enhancements that we got from the PlayStation 5. I have no doubt in my mind that this is the best way to play this game. The way they took advantage of the haptic feedback and the dynamic triggers, that was just awesome and something that I truly wasn't expecting. The amount of awesome weapons in the game, I was expecting to maybe get half the amount of weapons we got in the game. That was a welcome surprise. You know, they got thermal detonators in the game. What's not to like about that? There are some familiar faces and enemies from throughout the Star Wars universe that I wasn't expecting to see. Overall, I would say that this game kicks some major ass. It's totally worth picking up at $30. I think anyone who plays this game is going to enjoy it. Just know what you're going into. You know, if you're somebody who can't go back and play a 90s shooter because you think the graphics suck, then I guess you might not like this game, but that's unfortunate because this game is really awesome. It was time well spent, and obviously I couldn't recommend this game anymore. So if you do end up picking up this game after watching the review, let me know what you thought about it in the comments below. I am interested to hear if you enjoyed the game as much as I did, and if you didn't, let me know as well. All right, thank you all for tuning in. I hope you have an excellent day.